Everyone knows. Coming home late from work always has hidden risks. But the risks that the older sister in this story encountered were truly beyond our imagination. It was a quiet late night. She had just finished work. Exhausted. Just wanting to get home quickly. The road home was familiar every day. But tonight, it was eerily quiet. The video we saw was taken from a security camera. Viewed from above, the black and white and grainy image further enhanced the ghostly feeling. Everything was still quiet, until, from the darkness, a small white figure began to appear. It did not walk, but it crawled strangely on the ground. Its small body, glowing dimly in the night. And then, a shrill scream rang out, tearing apart the silence. "Help me!" It was the older sister's voice. She must have seen it. The scream was full of panic and despair. "Help me! Help me!" The white figure continued to move. It twitched, writhed, every movement unnatural, as if it was in some kind of pain, or as if it was not a creature of this world. The scream continued, haunting, despair. Then suddenly, the white figure disappeared into the darkness. As suddenly as it had appeared. The Melaleuca forest at noon was strangely quiet. The sun could not warm the gloomy air. Seeping through the thin, bony tree trunks. Fawn, a man with some courage and compassion for spiritual matters, came here after hearing about a wandering soul. He knelt down, burned a handful of votive paper. The gray smoke curled up and disappeared into thin air. He muttered a prayer, hoping to help some soul be liberated. Suddenly, a chilling wind blew through him. Fawn raised his head. From afar, between the rows of trees, a white shadow appeared. It was a woman, wearing an old al-ba-ba, her long black hair hanging down, completely covering her face. She just stood there, silent, a shadowy figure as if she did not belong to this world. Fawn was startled, his heart pounding. He stood up in fear, intending to run away, but when he turned to look back, she had disappeared. He carefully walked along the path. The sound of dry leaves crunching under his feet was terrifying. And then, she appeared again at the end of the path. Like an invitation, an invisible lure. Just like that, she retreated deeper into the darkness. And Fawn, as if hypnotized, followed. At a turn, he faced her. This time, he did not run. He knelt down, his voice trembling. "Oh, the girl's soul. I came here with no intention of harming her. I only hope to help her soul to be liberated." As he spoke, he continued to burn the last pieces of paper money, praying sincerely for the poor girl. But the answer to his plea was not peace. In a terrifying moment, that white shadow suddenly rushed forward, like an arrow tearing through the quiet space. Fawn screamed silently, fear choking his throat. He threw everything away, ran as fast as he could, not daring to look back. When he had run out of the forest, he stood panting, sweat pouring out like a shower. The Kajapit forest had become quiet again, as if nothing had happened. The spirit had disappeared, but something urged him to turn back. Gathering all his courage, Fawn tiptoed back to the trail where he had just faced the horror. And he saw it. Lying neatly in the middle of the road was a pair of old, tattered plastic sandals. The strap was broken, tied together with a fishing line. Obviously, this was the relic of a person who had lived an extremely miserable life. Fawn was stunned and picked up the sandals. Then his eyes glanced to the side. Right where he had knelt to burn votive paper earlier, was a small, anonymous grave, overgrown with weeds. A cold truth ran down his spine. He performed the ritual rite on her final resting place. She wasn't trying to scare him. She was just trying desperately to show him the forgotten grave. The old sandals, and her whole life full of injustice. He understood. She wasn't a demon. She was just a poor, Forgotten ghost with her old sandals in the cold. Deserted Kajapit forest. The night fell. Deep and quiet to the point of being creepy. There was a guy, perhaps to test his courage, or simply to make a cool video, who turned on his camera in the middle of that desolate scene. He was filming himself, his mouth mumbling along to a heroic gangster movie line. For more than 10 years, I've been wandering the world, not just relying on my guts. He talked about faith, about brothers, about loyalty. His expression at first still had a bit of confidence. But then, his eyes started to have something strange. Confusion, fear, because, as soon as those brave words rang out, behind him, from the thick darkness, a head, a bloody woman's head, slowly emerged. Its eyes were wide open, soulless, staring into the lens, as if it had been there for a long time, silently listening to him brag. The guy's face stiffened, the forced smile disappeared from his lips. He didn't dare to turn around. He could only look at the phone screen with utter horror. The demon was still there, right behind his neck, and then, suddenly, the video changed. The camera shook violently, panning wildly into the dark forest. The guy seemed to have run away. His courage from earlier had gone up in smoke. And then, a white shadow, flashing by like a gust of wind. Only his horrifying, panicked scream echoed in the night. Ghost, ghost, run. It hit me, and then the screen went black. The first entity that appeared behind the guy was very similar to the description of Penanggalan in Malaysian folklore, or Kresu in Thai culture. This is a type of terrifying female ghost, which can take the form of a normal person during the day. But at night its head and internal organs will separate from its body to seek fresh blood. Characteristics: it doesn't attack right away, but instead appears silently, as a warning that in desolate places, human courage is a laughing stock to the spirit world. Its soulless eyes reveal an ancient, emotionless evil. It delights in human fear rather than physical attack. This video is a terrifying reminder that the spirit world comes in many forms. There are demons that like to stalk, slowly gnawing at your fear. And there are other spirits that like to rush straight at you, leaving you in utter terror. The guy in the video was unlucky enough to encounter both types on the same night. This story takes us to a deserted place at night, perhaps an abandoned area. A man is shaking with a camera, walking with a friend. They are not walking, they are looking for something, or running away from it. The air is thick with fear. There, look, his friend exclaimed, his voice full of panic, pointing to a bush near an old concrete wall. From the darkness, a white shadow appeared. It was a girl, referred to as Kaka, but it was not an ordinary girl. Her body had been taken over. She bent down, her head almost touching the ground, then began to crawl, slithering towards them. Every movement was jerky, unnatural, like a puppet whose strings had been cut, or a wild animal stalking its prey. The cameraman screamed in fear. He backed away. The white shadow of Kaka raised its head, and although its face was not clearly visible, one could still feel its blank, empty gaze directed at them. And then, it began to accelerate. It rushed towards them like a spider, moving on its arms and legs at a terrifying speed. In a panic, the two men turned and ran for their lives, their gasps and screams mixing. They ran towards a nearby dark tunnel, perhaps thinking it was a shelter. And that was when the real horror took shape. When the light shone on the tunnel's entrance, the thing standing there was no longer Kaka. It was huge, black, and deformed like a hybrid beast. It stood there, blocking the only way out. And in the midst of that deep darkness were two glowing red flames. The eyes of the demon. The video ends there, leaving us with the panting of the cameraman and the haunting image of the monster waiting in the tunnel. This is the first stage of the hunt. The skinwalker, a shape-shifting witch in Navajo culture, has taken over Kaka's body. It uses its human form to intrigue and appeal to the victim's compassion. However, the inhuman movements, crawling, slithering, twitching, create an uncanny valley effect, turning curiosity into extreme fear. It is a psychological terror, causing the prey to lose their composure and panic. The scene is a large yard at night, captured by a security camera. The time on the screen reads 10:32 p.m. November 1st, 2021. Everything seems normal. A person, perhaps a worker or the homeowner, is working hard, seemingly trying to pull a large plastic tarp to cover some kind of material. The work seems quite strenuous in the quiet space. But they are not alone. At the gate, a small white cat stands motionless, like a living statue, its eyes probably watching every action in the yard. The person continues to pull the tarp. One more step, then another. Everything is normal, until one moment, boom, the person disappears. They don't run away. They don't fall down. They aren't dragged away by anything. They simply vanished into thin air in a split second. The tarp they were pulling lost its grip, gently falling to the ground. But the cat, it was still there, silent, unmoved, as if it had witnessed this scene 1,000 times. As if it knew this would happen. The video ended, leaving behind an empty yard, a tarp lying around, and an eerily silent witness. The scariest thing about this video was not the hideous apparition, but the absurd disappearance and the presence of the only witness, the white cat. In a simple room, the light from an infrared camera casts a cold, gray light over everything. A man is fast asleep on an old bed, exhausted after a long day. All around, it's completely quiet. But tonight, the space is not as quiet as it seems. A plaintive, mournful sound, like the wailing of a spirit, begins to echo from somewhere in the room. The sound is long, haunting, penetrating every corner. The man on the bed is still sleeping, completely unaware. And then, the first unusual thing happens. Suddenly, the plastic chair placed next to the refrigerator lifts itself into the air, then crashes to the ground with a dry sound. An action that defies all laws of physics. It seems that an invisible force is angry. And then, the camera pans down to under the bed, where the real horror awaits. From the dim darkness, a hand slowly appeared, but it was not a human hand. It was thin, black, with long, sharp claws like knives. It gently dug into the ground, as if testing its strength. A feeling of unease crept into the dream. The man on the bed began to stir. And then, a second hand appeared beside it. Two demonic hands with terrifying claws. The man woke up with a start. He jumped out of bed in panic, perhaps feeling a cold touch or hearing a noise right below him. A silent scream. He quickly looked under the bed. But in his panic, he saw nothing. Or perhaps, he didn't dare look closely. He looked around the room desperately. Without a second's hesitation, he rushed out of the room, leaving everything behind, running away from the horror he couldn't explain. And the camera was still there, capturing the final moment. The two demonic hands were still there, hidden under the bed, as if patiently waiting for their prey to return. This is the embodiment of one of the most primal fears of man. Something lurking under the bed. The place where we are most vulnerable, in our sleep, is the hiding place of a demon.